Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments on bicycle travel adventures. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/378, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109, and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 378th edition of the Pedal Shift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition, it is the eBike Project Shakedown Preview. This is going to be a fun situation here. We preview a short but momentous little overnight adventure on my brand new e-bike. We'll discuss goals, strategies, recharge options, and hey, we're getting back on the C&O again. It is a glorious late summer / early fall day here in West Virginia, and I am going to be leaving, as I sit here right now, tomorrow on a really fun little shakedown ride, and I'm excited to share all of that with you. You have already been exposed to, shall we say, the mega episode about the bike build. Here is the first time I'm going to be taking it out on any kind of a real bike adventure. So here's the basics. Obviously, the e-bike is the centerpiece of this. It will be a fully charged 20 amp hour battery. So I will be doing a full top off charge, probably starting tomorrow morning. I'm using these times because that's when I'm going tomorrow. So I'll be talking about it with that thought and with that frame of reference. I will be rocking a lighter than what I would normally ride setup, but I do want to be able to kind of see how it feels with some stuff in it. So I'm going to have two panniers. These will be the newer blue ones, the Ortlieb back rollers, and I will probably, depending on how things go, I may put the sleep kit on the handlebars like I did for the Oregon trip this past year. Of course, I have flat bars now, and so I have more space for those. I would like to see how it goes, but I may just throw everything into the panniers. If memory serves, I may not even have the proper stuff to put it on my handlebars. So we'll have to see how that goes. One of the things that's really interesting about having a new bike is that I'm having to decide whether or not I'm going to buy new things for it specifically, or just kind of use stuff off of the other bikes and borrow. So that's where we're at right now. No food, no stove coming with me on this one. I may reconsider the stove depending on if I decide I want to do some coffee in the morning, because, well, we'll get to that in a little bit. So initially, at least, I'm not going to plan on bringing any meals or any stove with me. And the reason is, simply put, I'm going to be someplace where there's going to be food available before I end up at the campground. Sleep clothes only. I'm not going to bring any additional clothing. Whatever I ride down in, I will ride back in as well. I don't expect to be sweaty at all going down. I may, but they'll certainly dry out. I think I'll be fine. So we're going to have a really minimal clothing setup. I will bring rain gear if necessary. The current forecast, and I will get into that in a little bit, is a bit of a question mark. But if it does look like it's going to be dry for the whole time, then I may leave the rain gear at home. The bigger thing is that I'm going to have to make sure that my sleep gear includes stuff that's warm enough, and warm enough stuff for the morning as well, because it's going to be chilly, which is so nice to say. I am going to be bringing more tools than I typically bring on a bike adventure. I'm going to be bringing my chain breaker and a master link breaker and a few other things. I haven't run into this problem in a while, but when I was first riding this bike, I was running into some chain situations where it kind of seized up. I think I have fixed that problem, but I'm still unsure if my chain is the right length. And that's going to be something that I may be looking at fixing later on down the line. So anyways, that's sort of the e-bike. It's done. It's just, in a state of flux in some ways. Here's the route. I am going to be doing the classic road route from my cabin to Hancock, Maryland. It is going to be a repeat of the in reverse of the route that I did coming off of the C&O earlier this year. The nice thing about that, of course, is that it is mostly downhill going down there, and I will be ending up at the park in Hancock, Maryland, after maybe visiting a gas station, the Sheetz gas station, for some gas station cuisine for dinner. And then I will be kind of hanging out in the park because there are some opportunities for camping there, which is interesting, but also the possibility of charging things as well. And as I think of it, my recollection is that the outlets that are available for charging are kind of up a bit. So I'm going to make sure that I bring an extension cord to help out with that. Whether the electricity will be on will be an open question too. I'll be returning the next morning, depending on where I end up camping. I may be coming back into Hancock itself, but I will be taking the road route in the direction that you've all experienced this year. But of course, the difference is instead of it going to be 3 hours following a 50 some odd mile day, I'm now going to be doing it fresh after a night's sleep, and I'll be doing it on the e-bike. So I expect that will go much better. Total mileage is probably going to be about 40 altogether, maybe a little bit more depending on if I end up taking advantage of a C&O campsite further down the trail. We shall see. Why is this such a short little adventure here? Well, I need to keep things close to not just civilization, because of course there's a bike shop in Hancock, but also close enough to a vehicular rescue, because I just don't know what could potentially go wrong. My confidence level in this bike is reasonably high, but it's not as high as if I had a professional who was cranking on my bike, as opposed to me, someone who I don't trust me as much. And I also have run into a few of those things with the chains that I talked about before. Also, who knows what could happen electrically? I've only ridden this bike a couple of miles at a time. I've put it through its paces, but not for an extended period of time. So I do want to make sure that it is in a place where if something goes sideways, I've got options available to me. It is a short ride, but I will say there's a lot of climbing. There are some long flats where speed is going to be helpful. And there's just a lot of good ways to test out sort of, not necessarily the outer limits of this bike. I don't think it's going to be that challenging for it, but it's a good way for me to see, all right, how quickly does the battery drain when I do certain things? I'm also sort of learning on the technique of when to use higher pedal assist and when not to. And so that's something that I'm also learning as well. That's why keeping it short is kind of a misnomer, because I think I'm going to learn a ton, because this is real world riding. I think a lot of the riding that I'll end up doing on this bike will probably end up being on a lot of flats and not necessarily a ton of hills, although it certainly can handle that. But I'm going to learn an awful lot about what are the general capabilities and what can I expect in a longer multi-day tour with us. I think that the biggest thing that I'm interested in gauging is how much range the bike has with its one battery, this current single battery, on real terrain. Because as a quick reminder, my ability to fast charge this is sort of, it's borked a bit, because the barrel, there's a barrel charger insert. I'm saying this all wrong, of course. The type of connector that I have for charging has an upper limit of amperage, which is a little bit too low for what I would consider fast charging. I think I would need to be able to use something that's more in the 8 amps range, maybe between 6 and 8 amps of range. And this is a 3 or a 4 amp charger. And of course, that impacts the amount of juice that goes into the battery, which means time. It needs more time for full charging. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that kind of down the line. So this is going to be, as I mentioned before, minimal gear and gas station cuisine. Hancock has plenty of food options close to that city park that I think has electricity available. There are also a nicer restaurant if I so chose to do that. There are a variety of different things. Heck, there's even a Pizza Hut, and I believe you can eat there, which is unusual for Pizza Huts these days. But if you grew up in the 70s and 80s like me, Pizza Hut, that was like high-end cuisine. So that's a possibility too if I so chose. I am going to bring my water purifier with me, just in case. I'm probably going to bring enough water with me from the tap to be all that I need, because I just don't need a ton of water. It's not that hot. My water needs are going to be relatively minimal. I'll be able to get more water in town even. So from a camping perspective and all of that, I just may not need that, but I am going to bring it just in case, that water purifier, because a reminder, the C&O water availability no longer has in those pumps purified water. You do have to make it potable yourself as of, was it last year? I think it was last year. I'm trying to keep the variables to a minimum, but at the same time, I also want to keep my options open. So it's a bit of a balancing act there. Weather. I am so excited. Today I was walking outside and it was just elite weather, as I like to say. Cool mornings, warm afternoons, but not hot, warm, pleasant. I stuck my face in the sun today and I was like, oh my God, it feels like the sun is not trying to kill me like it has been all summer long. So it is really nice that it's nice and cool. Highs projected for the day that I'm riding in the 70s, roughly about 24 Celsius. And the lows are going to be in the mid 50s or about 13 Celsius. So we're talking elite camping weather. Really excited for that. As I mentioned, rain is in the forecast for the morning, but not 100% rain. I do think that it's entirely possible that it could not rain here, but rain down in Hancock. That happens. There's some kind of weird rain shadows here around the cabin that I've noticed, but I don't expect that rain will be an issue for my riding. If that changes, I've the rain gear here. I can make it work. I think that the bigger issue is going to be the fact that I may have wet ground in the afternoon and the early evening where I would be setting up my tent, but that's really not a big deal. That's why we have those little tent protectors and all that other kind of stuff. So I do think that I am going to need to be prepared for a cool, I won't call it cold, but a cool night. So I'm going to do the down bag. Of course, I got my sleeping pad, got the tent, nothing too crazy as we transition into fall. But, we are getting to the point where the gear that I bring for camping, it really just changes because I'm no longer worried about being too hot and bringing fans of all things. Now I'm making sure that I have to scrounge for a winter hat because I'll probably want to wear one in the evening. But these are all good problems to have. I am really excited for all of that. So what am I going to look for out of this trip? I want to ensure that this build is both solid and safe. So the rack, making sure that that doesn't vibrate weird. The brakes, that they're braking right. The cables, they're no longer pinched. So making sure that everything's shifting and braking fully and that the brakes return. It'll be interesting to see. I do have that wedge in there, those good wedges that I put in. But I also haven't been riding for long distances, and that motor may want to torque up and pinch on those cables. So we'll learn about that. Do I have to put in a bigger wedge? Do I have to put in more there? So more to come on that. Testing the range on the battery, as I've already mentioned, that is a really key thing here. I have no sense of whether or not I'm going to need to recharge even. I may not need a lot of battery assist going to Hancock and to the campsite, but I'm certainly going to use it coming back. And I think it's a good measuring stick for all of that. I'm excited to see what that looks like. If I do have to do a recharge, how fast will my charger work? The answer is probably not a lot, but will it get me an extra couple of miles worth of activity? That's fine because the ride's only 20 on the way back. That may be more than I need. I want to get a feel for the suspension on the bike. I can dial in the front fork suspension a little bit. Right now, my perception is that it's a little soft and I may want to stiffen it up. We'll see. I'll gauge that. I also want to get a feel on the new tires that are on there. I'm really quite pleased with them right now, the way they've been riding here in and around the cabin. I think I mentioned in a prior episode that I've put about 20 some odd miles on it now, and most of those miles have been on these new tires. And I've been really pleased with how they've been going so far, but getting more of a feel of them. I've never ridden on tires this wide for my bike adventures at all. And so it's kind of cool to be on something a little bit wider. Also dialing in how much inflation on these tires. I need to test to see where I'm at because my pump here does not have, I'm just looking at it, does not have a gauge on it, but I do have some other gauges that I can take a look at and see what the inflation is. And so I'll have to check that out and see what my best level is. Here's my friend Mookie coming back, who barked all the way through that episode. Thank you for putting up with that. Let's see what else. The tires. Assessing comfort. How long can I be on this saddle? I had mentioned that I was going to swap out the saddle on this, but I've been too lazy, and I'm just going to try this saddle out and see how it is. I do think that that's one thing that I may end up upgrading, going against everything I've ever said, and that I love stock saddles. Well, this stock saddle is a little on the cheaper side, so I may upgrade this one. I'm going to assess the need for more add-ons. I do have, since we have last visited, I have a cell phone holder on there, which is going to be really necessary, although I really don't need it for directions, but it's just good to have that there. I also have, what else do I have in there? A feed bag, which will be good for a water bottle holder, but also some other things as well. So lots of things that are there. I may decide that I want more or less. I may decide all sorts of different things, but this is a really good shakedown amount of stuff that I've got, but I may consider more add-ons. I'm looking forward to a chill night on the C&O. I haven't been camping there in a while, since the spring. I haven't been camping at all since when I was in Oregon this summer, so it's been a couple of months. It's just been too hot, and it's just not enjoyable for me. So now that the weather is chilled out a bit, I'm looking forward to getting in the tent again. And I've got some other camping coming up soon, which will be revealed to you shortly. There's a little bit of a preview that says nothing. Podcast plans. I am going to be doing, as I sit here right now, this episode right now, the preview, and I believe what we're going to do is a single tour journal for the entire trip. Rather than split it up into two, I don't think there's going to be a ton of recording over the course of those 40 miles unless something goes really sideways. So the current plan is to do a single episode for the tour journals, and then we'll do a takeaways episode that obviously, we'll talk about the very small nature of that trip and lessons learned and all of that, assessments. But I think also I'm going to utilize that episode as a way of talking about where I'm looking for next steps and some potential ideas for this bike in 2025. If this all goes well, I am starting to think about what is in the realm of possible for this bike and what I can do and where I want to go and what it opens up for me that wasn't open before without an e-bike. So it's kind of exciting. And I'm glad to bring you along on the ride on this one, as always with all tour journals. But this is the kind of end of summer, early fall bike adventure. I've got, let's see, as I mentioned before, another bike adventure or a bike adjacent adventure that's coming up and that'll be coming around shortly after this release, which I'm really excited about. Brand new place, which I'm really, really stoked to. You'll hear all about it. I'm only talking about it now because it's imminent as I sit here, and I am very excited for that particular adventure. It's going to be different, and it's going to be in a different place, and it's nice to do something other than the usuals and to share that with you. So that's coming up too. So we've got a lot of great bike adventures through the end of the year.
And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedal Shift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedal Shift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community. Expanding into live shows and covering new tours, if you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one shot and annual options. If you're not into the small monthly thing, check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittus, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadis, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Mr. T, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joaquin Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Hankel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Jody Zaranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Bigel, Greg Middlemiss, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latoile Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Ronald Paroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messenger, David Grotke, Todd Grossbeck, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Lico, Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Robert Lackey, Dominic Carroll, Jackie McCullough, John Hickman, Carl Presseau, David Neves, Patty Louise, Terry Fitzgerald, Peter Steinmetz, Timothy Fitzpatrick, Michael Azuski, Hank O'Donnell, David Zanoni, David Weil, Matthew Sponsella, Chad Reno, Spartan Dale, Carolyn Ferguson, Peggy Littlefield, Lauren Allensmith, Eric Burns, Thomas Pearl, Darren McKibben, Richard Stewart, Dave Fletcher, Jack Smith, Luke Parkinson, Ryan Patterson, Cyrus Farivar, John Gardner, Sam Scruggs, Dwight Pintinger, Connie Bowder, Rob Merrifield, and thanks to all past and anonymous folks for helping make this show happen.
Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.